Until really quite recently, it looked like the Taliban's grip on Afghanistan was only getting tighter. There were no real challenges to their authority, and most of Afghanistan's neighbours were quietly trying to normalise relations, a reflection of the fact that they didn't see the Taliban going anywhere anytime soon. However, in the past month or two, there's been a sudden upsurge in violence from anti-Taliban resistance outfits. So, in this video, we're going to take a look at what's happening in Afghanistan, and whether it presents a genuine challenge to Taliban rule. Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu promised a total regime change in Iran, but so far that hasn't happened. We explain why Trump was wrong and what post-war Iran's leadership might actually look like in the 9th edition of our magazine, Too Long. That's just one of the articles in our longest issue ever. Subscribe to get your copy by clicking the link in the description. So let's get straight into it. In short, there have been 3 episodes in the past couple of months that suggest that the Taliban might be losing control over Afghanistan. The first happened on July the 17th. When something like 25 militants from a previously unknown anti-Taliban resistance outfit called Sepahiyan-e Mihan, which translates to the Homeland Soldiers Front, suddenly seized control of Yaftali Sufla, a district in northeastern province of Badakhshan. While the Taliban were able to retake the district after a day or so, they were nonetheless forced to admit that they had temporarily lost control of territory, the first time this has happened since their return to power in 2021. The second episode happened in early August, when a group called the Afghanistan United Front, or AUF, began a series of attacks and assassinations against Taliban officials across Afghanistan. For context, the AUF are another anti-Taliban resistance group, led by a former general in the Afghan National Army called Sami Sadat. Sadat started working with the pre-Taliban Afghan government in 2007, before working his way up the ranks to become Deputy Chief of the Afghan National Army in 2021, barely a month before the US withdrawal and the subsequent Taliban takeover. Sadat then fled to the US, which is where he's been based since. In 2023, he founded the AUF, framing it as the legitimate continuation of the Afghan National Army, but they were originally more of a lobby group than a military outfit. That was until August the 1st, when Sadat released a video announcing that he had authorised AUF members to begin combat operations against the Taliban. Hours later, AUF militants killed 2 Taliban fighters in Kandahar and staged another attack in Helmand. There was then another attack on August the 2nd in the Ghor province, another on August the 3rd in Kandahar, another on the 4th of August in the Faryab province, and another 2 separate attacks on the 6th of August, again in Kandahar. Most of the targets were Taliban officials who had allegedly been involved in punishing Afghans that had cooperated with the US-backed government before the Taliban takeover. There was then a brief lull, but AUF restarted its attacks on the 13th of August, and they've continued at a steady pace since, with the latest attacks coming on Tuesday. The AUF don't seem to have any interest in actually taking territory, but the fact they have been able to carry out so many successful attacks, including in the Taliban's long-time stronghold of Kandahar, will presumably provoke some anxiety within the upper echelons of the Taliban. Finally, the third episode occurred in mid-August, when clashes broke out between the Taliban and forces loyal to an ethnic Tajik Taliban commander, Jumar Khan Fatah, in Badakhshan. The Taliban were eventually able to reassert control, but only after about a week of constant fighting, which incurred a number of casualties. The proximate cause of the clash was an attempt by the Taliban leadership to essentially seize military equipment that belonged to Fatah, but tensions have been simmering since at least May, when the Taliban suspended gold mining in parts of Badakhshan to stop Fatah from getting his hands on too much cash. That the Taliban are apparently anxious about local commanders building up their own power bases, which is something they've tolerated in the past, presumably reflects the fact that the Taliban themselves are anxious about losing their grip on power. This would be consistent with reports earlier this week that the Taliban have since tried to further cement their control over the province, sacking its governor on Tuesday and assigning several loyalists to the provisional government. Now, it's important not to overstate all this. These outbreaks of anti-Taliban violence have been localised and fleeting, and the idea of the Taliban actually losing power in Afghanistan still feels very far-fetched. It's also worth noting that, even if they really don't like them, most nearby countries are currently trying to stabilise relations with the Taliban, conscious of the fact that any attempt to actually replace the Taliban with a more amenable administration would obviously risk another messy civil war, and it's hard to imagine any resistance group putting up a real fight without support or sponsorship from a foreign government. Furthermore, the most serious unrest has occurred in Badakhshan and Herat, which have always been the more rebellious and anti-Taliban provinces. And on the whole, political violence against the Taliban has actually gone slightly down over the past year. Nonetheless, even if the Taliban look unlikely to be actually ousted anytime soon, these episodes should provoke some anxiety in their upper echelons, for two reasons. First, one of the reasons that violence has gone down a bit over the past year is because the Taliban have been trying to consolidate power across the country. For context, like other regimes with limited state capacity, the Taliban have traditionally delegated significant authority to local warlords, which is one of the reasons they consent to Taliban rule in the first place. However, in part because they're worried about local warlords building up their own independent power bases, the Taliban are now trying to undo this and centralise power. This might work, but risks provoking pushback from local warlords, and was the underlying cause of the recent outbreak of fighting in Badakhshan. Second, even if they might have given up on the idea of actually ousting them, at least some of Afghanistan's neighbours might still be tempted to capitalise on the recent unrest to put more pressure on the Taliban. The most obvious contender is Pakistan, which has been engaged in a sort of on-off war against the Taliban for the past couple of years, and whom the Taliban have already accused of sponsoring Sepahiyan-e Mihan. The root issue in the conflict is that the Taliban has been essentially unwilling, or perhaps unable, to crack down on the various terror groups operating out of Afghanistan and carrying out attacks inside Pakistan. Pakistani security services might thus be tempted to support one of these various resistance groups, both to get back at the Taliban, but also to give the Taliban a new motivation to suppress other militia groups in the country, with the hope that terror groups like the Pakistani-Taliban and Baloch Liberation Army would be swept up in the ensuing crackdown. Ultimately, even if the Taliban don't look like they're going anywhere anytime soon, the recent upsurge in resistance violence still presents a genuine problem, and, in the best-case scenario, might lend credence to its more moderate elements, who have long warned about the risk of popular unrest. Now, with a story like this, it takes us a lot of time and research to make sure we're getting all the correct and up-to-date information possible. But in today's world, it feels like 99% of websites demand your email address just to simply visit the page to learn more. Normally, we'd be tempted to just put in our email so we can get to the information quicker, but now we know better than that. And that's because of Proton Mail. Say we had put our email in, where does it actually go? Chances are our information will now be sold online to anyone who wants it, and our email inboxes are suddenly cluttered with a bunch of spam we definitely never asked for. Thankfully, Proton Mail offers a wide range of features to keep you safe and stop this from happening. From preventing dangerous phishing attacks with their FishGuard protection feature to protecting your identity by alerting you if your email has been sold to the dark web, Proton Mail has it all. They even offer unlimited email aliases to get around those pesky websites that demand your information. That means no ads, no tracking, and no profiling, which feels harder than ever to avoid today. Making the switch doesn't have to be hard, as Proton Mail's Easy Switch tool lets you move your emails and contacts from your current provider in just a few steps. You can even connect your Gmail account and receive and send messages from it directly in Proton Mail, while you transfer everything over at your own pace. And if migrating all your emails sounds a bit overwhelming right now, you can easily create an account today and just use both, one for those spam emails and one for the important emails you actually need to see. So start using Proton Mail for free by using our link at proton.me/TLDR, and you'll be one step closer to a fully protected online experience free of data exploitation.